Hello everyone, so I'm here today to do a wrap-up for the month of May, and I've read quite a few books, but a lot of them I have already reviewed, so I will talk briefly about those and I will leave links for all the videos that relate to each thing. So the first three books that I read are part of the Jon Fosse septology, so it was The Other Name, Eyes Another, and A New Name, and I read that for the International Booker. The last one was nominated to the International Booker, so I read them all, and again I have review for the septology in another video that I will link below, but basically it is a story following this character Asle, who is a painter in rural Norway, it sounds like, and it's written in a very stream of consciousness kind of way, so you have no full stops, it's just kind of a long sentence string of thoughts, so you feel like you are in the head of this character, and it goes about art and what it means to him, and the past and the present, and addiction and religion, and many of those topics. I found that even though I recognize why people like it, the topics were not engaging me. I didn't like the character, and there was this gimmick in which Asle knows another person also called Asle that looks like him and has the same interests, the same skills. It's pretty like, it's more or less like a clone of him, but he has a different life, and we see like the differences in their lives depending on the choices they made in their life. And there are several characters in the book that have sort of a clone of them with the same name, the same interest, the same look, everything. And it's never quite like explain what that is. It's more like a thought experiment than a actual thing. I don't know, it just felt very gimmicky to me, how they did that. So it was not my favorite, but it is well written, and I understand why it's in the Booker and why people like it. The next book I read was Things I Have Withheld by Kei Miller, which I read because it was part of the shortlist of the Jalak Prize. And this is a collection of essays by Kei Miller about being black in the more broader sense, because Kei Miller is Jamaican and he also travels around the world. It's part memoir as well. He travels to Africa, he travels to Europe, he travels to the US, and he talks about the differences on how he's treated, and also he talks about the conversations that he has with some thinkers in each part of the world and how he views their world views, and I thought it was very interesting. Kei Miller is a very good writer. His writing is very good, which I already knew because I have read his novel before, Augustown. But also like the thoughts that he has are much deeper than what I am used to in this kind of books about race, and he's also able to have that conversation in an engaging way without being preachy, without being alienating, I think. So yeah, that one is one that I highly recommend. And then I read two books for Springathon, On Time on Water by Andri Snaer Magnason, I think that's how you pronounce it, sorry if it's not, and Lucy in Eden by Lucy Jones. So On Time on Water, it's sort of a memoir of the author, who is Icelandic, and his relationship with climate change, especially related to water, so glaciers melting, and the sun and the sea rising, those kind of things. And for me, this book was very rambly and all over the place, but I talk more about that in my Springathon wrap-up, which I also link down below. And the other book that I talk about in that wrap-up is Lucy in Eden by Lucy Jones, which has as a premise the idea that humans need nature to be level-head humans, and there are connections between being in nature and lower risk of depression and things like that, and she explores that in more detail. And there were some interesting facts, like apparently there is this bacteria in soil that when you touch soil, you touch the bacteria, and that has been connected in some studies to lower risk of depression. So it's not just like the being outside and not being in front of a screen or like the calm vibes of the nature, but also like physical, biological things that are in nature that do that. So there was a few interesting points like that, but overall it was not as powerful as I thought it was gonna be. It just says a lot of things that I already knew. And some of the science that she presents are also a bit shaky, which she sometimes admits, but she still treats it like fact. But yeah, she says that many of these studies don't have a control group, they don't have a very scientific approach. The groups are generally small that they are studying. So yeah, writing a whole book about things that are so shaky in the science felt a little bit pointless to me. But yeah, I learned some things that were interesting, but overall I'm not sure it's as strong as a book. The next book I read was The Joy of Motherhood by Buchi Emecheta, and this is a book about Nguego, who is I think it was Yoruba woman in Nigeria, and when we start the book, she's in her village and she's just getting married to this man that she really likes, but unfortunately she cannot have children with him, so she's given back to her father, and she gets a new husband who is working in Lagos, so she has to move from the countryside to Lagos and get used to that way of life, and we see how she adapts to that. It's also set in around the World War, I think. So we see the soldiers coming and going, and her husband as well. He's laid off, and we see how he comes by. He works for a white family at the beginning, but then the white family leaves and he has to make a living for himself, and he's also from the countryside, and even though he has been living in Lagos for a while, he doesn't really understand the system so well. So we see all of these dynamics, and there were some interesting things that I learned from this, but the narration style is very dry in my opinion, so I didn't connect with any of the characters, and some really bad things happen in this book that we are told that the person feels very sad, but we don't really explore that in very much detail. Like, feelings are not explored in very much detail. It just shows how hard life is for this woman. But yeah, I didn't feel connected to her. I didn't feel like I felt what she was feeling. So in that sense, I found this a little bit disappointing, but I think that I find that often in classical African literature. I don't know if it is because in that culture you're not supposed to express your feelings as much, or there's so much hardship that there's only a limit of things that you can express. I'm not sure, but yeah, I felt that this was well written and it was interesting, but it was not my favorite. And then the last book that I read, I also have a review for, which I will also link down below, and it's Grey Bees by Andrev Kurkov, and I read this as part of the Invisible Cities, and this book is Ukrainian. So this book is about Sergei, who is a beekeeper in this grey zone in the east of Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. And this man is Ukrainian. He has a Ukrainian passport. But when he is in the grey zone, things are progressively getting worse and worse. Like, they don't have electricity, and water, and there's drones flying around, and the conflict is getting closer and closer. So at some point he decides to leave with his beast, and he goes to Crimea, and he finds a place where he temporarily puts his stuff, but then, as we know, Crimea was also taken by the Russians. So we see Sergei trying to grapple with life in the move, and life, this uncertainty, which I think is a very apt topic for the moment right now, because it doesn't focus so much on the hard, violent things of war, like in the fight. It's more about the displacement and the uncertainty and the worry of what's gonna come in the future. That's the main focus on the book. How to survive in this environment when you don't know when you're going to leave, or you don't know what's gonna happen in the future. You have the sound of war in the background, which I thought it was a very clever way to show this book. And I think the writing is also beautiful at points, and it's overall a very successful book. It's also funny at times. So yeah, I enjoy the book. I think that sometimes it's a little bit too slow, which makes sense because the uncertainty and the weight is slow, and I think that the book does a good job expressing that. It's just, as a reading experience, sometimes it does feel slow and tedious, which, again, it's I think it's intentional. It's just, it's not the most enjoyable thing to experience. So yeah, I like that one. That's all I read this month. Let me know if you have read any of these things, or if you want to read any of these, or what you read this month that you really liked. And until next video, bye!